Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is our 280th episode, which is such a huge deal, and we can't thank you enough for listening to us on this show for so many years. We really, really do appreciate it. And as we do every 10th episode, this is an audience-supplied Q&A session where we do our best to answer as many queries as possible throughout the duration of the show. Today, I'll be doing the asking, and coaches Brian Miner and Jeff Alberts will be doing the answering. We typically kind of rotate where the questions come from, and today we have a mix of YouTube and Instagram comments for this one. You can always find our squad and leave comments on all of our videos, podcasts, and posts by searching at Team 3DMJ on both of those platforms. So that's at TEAM 3DMJ on both YouTube and Instagram to keep in touch with us and ask questions for future shows that may be coming later on. Topics covered in today's episode will include how to know when you're recovered well between sessions, when you should or shouldn't have a cheat day on rest days or training days, when, if ever, it's time to start integrating long-term periodization strategies into your training plan, what it means to have a good relationship with food and how to create one, how to handle short-term photo shoot preps versus longer-term contest preps, whether or not it's better to focus on unilateral or bilateral exercises for a better stimulus and muscle growth, how to use posing techniques to maximize weak body parts on stage, how to deal with uncommitted clients as a coach or trainer, and what type of tanner or tanning method is best used for bodybuilding competitions, and so much more. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, it's best to let us know over on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 280. Let's go ahead and get into it. Here is Q&A session 28 with Brian Miner and Jeff Alberts. Question 1, how do you know if you're recovered or well recovered? I got crazy long DOMs in my calves and my hammies from just 3 sets for about 5 days afterwards. Should I wait to train the muscle when the DOMs are completely gone, or is a little bit of DOMs okay? What do you think, Brian?
I think, recovery, most people kind of use DOMs as a proxy for that. And it's not a super reliable way to assess recovery. When we, like in the sports science terminology, recovery is like performance related. Your ability to replicate your baseline performance as you're, recovered back to baseline. So that's probably more important in the sense that, if you've gotten back to baseline or even improved, over time, even if you're experiencing DOMs, then we know positive adaptations are taking place. And so in that case, I don't think severe DOMs is something that should be ignored. Some light DOMs, I'd say if I had to score like 1 to 10, I'd say 5 to 7 is probably a pretty reasonable range, at least after you start a program, once you're, kind of in a good rhythm with it. Because sometimes when you start something new, you introduce either more volume or, post deload, like you can have some initial soreness, and then, that gets mitigated, with repeated exposure. So, I'd say for like an intro week or coming off of, a period of lower training volume, maybe like a, 6 to 8, and then maybe 5 to 7 after that is sort of the scale I would kind of use as a rough guideline there.
If they're sore for 5 days, you think that's excessive?
I think it depends on I would need more context though, because if it's 3 weeks into the block, 4 weeks into a training block, and they're doing calves for 3 sets, and it's sore for 5 days, that would lead me to believe it probably is excessive. But I couldn't say that with certainty without also looking at performance, and not even just in that movement, just in other places too. But I wouldn't say it's alarming in and of itself, but I mean, if I could do the same amount of volume if I like emphasize a pause at the bottom of a calf raise and like really make the quality of work better for an existing amount of volume. I can feel it the next day for sure. But I haven't had that crippling like 5 to 7 day DOMs in a long time, which is, yeah, that's what we want to avoid, I would say. If you're having a hard time walking, you pushed it too far for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if someone's consistently sore for that long every single week or even every other week, to me, that's excessive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that would, like, for me, I'd be like, okay, do I really need as much volume as I'm doing?
Or are they having too big of breaks between sessions? Like,
my chest is super sore today, Andrew, because I haven't trained chest in like 9 or 10 days.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So you get detrained if the frequency isn't high enough.
Yeah. So it could be not so much a volume issue, but more like a frequency issue in this case. Because it's not a lot of volume, 3 sets. And I've had mild DOMs that last 4 or 5 days. And I think that's a different landscape than like severe DOMs lasting 3 to 5 days.
I've had because generally hamstrings get sore quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially if from RDLs because of the stretching on that. And it happens at times where some of my athletes, I have to either split up leg curls and RDLs in different days because they just get really sore in the hamstrings, or I'll just chop some of the set volume down. So I've had some athletes doing just like 2 sets of leg curls, for example, and 2 sets of RDLs, and it's plenty.
Yeah.
And sometimes just dropping a set off could take you from being super sore to just minimally sore. And that way when you get to the next session, it's like you're not really, trying to fight uphill as far as performance.
For sure.
Like personally, I don't like being sore.
Yeah.
I don't like the feeling. It's like, I don't think you need to be sore to produce hypertrophy.
No, absolutely not.
So like if I'm sore, I typically, if it's sore, like minimally sore, I'll train. But if it's beyond a 3, I'm just going to take a day off.
Yeah.
I'm going to rest. So that way when I go in there, I feel like mentally just ready to go.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to recovery too, I think not just from a physical perspective, but mentally too, like, am I motivated and ready to train?
Yeah, or if you're like mentally inhibited because you're still so sore from last time, like maybe it wouldn't damage you if you trained it, but if you're like thinking about it or changing your form because of it, then it's like, just wait.
Yeah. I start questioning like, okay, am I doing too much? Am I training enough as far as frequency?
Yeah.
Do I really need to do, X number of sets? Can I improve my efficiency? Maybe it's, can I increase the loading? Can I do more reps? Do I need to do 4 sets or 3 sets or whatever? So I start asking myself those quality questions.
Okay. So as far as the DOMs itself, like the soreness being the question, like you said, it could be going too hard or not going frequently enough. Like even if it was 3 sets that killed them and they're doing it once a week, what if you did two sessions
you could do
sets?
2. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Like people who train once per week, like in general, you'll probably experience more soreness than someone who's training, like hitting everything twice per week. What you can do if you're someone who does better, performs and recovers better hitting things once per week, what you can do, let's say for hamstrings, as an example, if you're getting sore for 5 days, like, okay, you have like one of your upper days, you're like, okay, I'm just going to do like 2 sets of leg curls. So you're hitting it minimally, you're getting that exposure to it, and then it kind of cures the prolonged soreness you're experiencing from just doing it once per week. I do that at times for some athletes as well, as far as programming.
Just bridge the gap a little bit.
Or even like big quad exercise. Like say they have one lower day, they just do one lower session, they're getting sore in the quads. I might have them do like leg extensions somewhere else along the week just to basically get the frequency up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think a good place to start maybe for him, like you said, Andrew, is take similar amount of volume, 3-4 sets, split it up into 2 sessions, see if that helps. And then if it does, it probably is a frequency thing where you just need more repeated exposure. But
what if it's the opposite though? What if it's like 3 sets? It's just every single time they do
3
it,
sets
doesn't matter if the frequency is once, twice, 3 times a week.
Then I would go down to 2 and evaluate it then.
Same.
And they're probably really good calf raises too, if they're getting that wrecked from 2 sets.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember the last time I was sore doing 2 sets of calf raises.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first part of the question, like, how do you know if you're recovered or well recovered? I think historically we've thought of those as like 2 different things. Like there is local soreness or whatever, but then being recovered is, even though this was presented to us in one question, they're kind of like 2 different things. We tend to think of that as like global.
Yeah, I mean,
and we
I
just
think,
did a podcast on this called The Art of Fatigue Management. So go back like 1 or 2 episodes, maybe 3, and go listen to that. But go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, I mean, recovered, I would kind of look at performance as the main metric there. Well recovered, if we wanted to assign some type of useful definition here, maybe it's performance is good and you're not really sore. I think there's not any like formal definitions to these things, so it's hard to. But yeah, I mean, I will say I've definitely had sessions where I've gone in and I've maybe been 3 out of 10 soreness and had like a great session, and performed and beat the last numbers, all things equal. So I wouldn't, maybe my scale's it's a little bit higher than Jeff's, but I think it's just based on the individual. I mean, 5 to 6 is still a pretty manageable, like it should be a pretty manageable amount of soreness.
But sometimes you just feel tired, like in general, like general fatigue. Like if there's a difference between tired and being lazy, because there's some days where I'm like, I don't feel like, I think I'm tired. I don't want to train, but then I do it anyway. Then I have an amazing training session. And then there's been the flip side where I felt amazing. I go in there and have a terrible workout. Like performance just sucks. So usually if I'm feeling like where I don't feel like training, more times than not, I'll go in there with the intention of training, and I'll just go by like that first exercise, like that first couple of sets. If it's really bad, like performance is way down, I'm not feeling it, just feels off, then I'll just say, okay, I'm just going to take the rest of the session off. I'm just going to walk out. And then focus on recovery. Make sure nutrition is on point. Make sure I'm getting in bed at a good time. Make sure sleep quality is good. Stay hydrated. Come back the next day. If I go in there the first exercise and everything's going great, okay, perfect. But I think you don't want to have the mindset of like, I just feel tired, so I'm not going to train. I don't think you should have that as your first.
Yeah. And you'll learn that over time.
100%.
Like you have,
I will add,
like, I think going in there is nice. Going in there and trying to be like, to find out, oh, that feeling was not recovered, or that feeling was, I needed to wake up or something.
I do have a general rule for myself though. If I don't get at least 6 hours sleep, if I get anything less than that and I feel like crap, I don't train. Because through my own history, when I've trained in that state, most of the time performance isn't there. And then the recovery is that much harder after that, because now I'm even more tired. So I kind of have like, just going through, some trial and errors, I've kind of learned things about myself. I think it's important you're taking notes too on your own recovery. Like Brian said, okay, where's my soreness levels at? How much sleep did I get? Was I hydrated or not? Was it a good nutrition day the day before, the day of? Like those things you gotta stay on top of, and keeping data on that's important, not just number data, but also like notes. I know you're good with note taking, Andrea. So it's like that stuff you can kind of look back on to gain a lot of insight on yourself.
One last thing I was going to add, if I would also look at performance on other lifts. Like if you're, like, let's say your legs are destroyed and maybe there's like a high degree of muscle damage there, like that can impact like the central nervous system, to some extent. And so like you could see a decreased performance in other lifts if you have like excessive muscle damage, potentially. So it's like if everything, like if it's extends beyond like a localized thing, like, oh, my bench went up, but my tricep work or my bicep work wasn't great. That's one thing, but it's like, wow, everything sucks, even though, my recovery habits have been in check, then I would say, yeah, it's a recovery issue for sure. Or a volume
Good
issue,
points.
and maybe you need to add in some additional rest days or something.
More than covered that one, I think. All right, let's go on to question 2. What do you think about a cheat meal or a cheat day? Is it better on a training day post-workout or an off day to give you more food for the next few workouts? How will I use the food the best? Jeff, go ahead and get us started.
I don't like the word cheat.
I know you don't.
Because cheat's
I don't
a
either.
negative
I think
connotation.
globally we don't.
Because it means you're trying to get away with something.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought would be like, how can I set up my structure to where I don't have to have a cheat meal or cheat day? So that might mean you need more calories just spread out across the board. So if you're under eating all these other days and now you're relying on this one big heavy meal to produce good training, it's like, well, maybe you need to take a big step back and evaluate like the big picture.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, if we're talking about a contest prep athlete that's deep into prep, then it's not going to be a cheat meal or a cheat day. It's going to be called a refeed or a high day. So it's planned and it has structure to it and has targets to it. So it might mean we get another 400 calories today, or it might mean another 800, or whatever the number is. You get more food, and strategically where I would place it would be on a non-training day. So that way you're eating more calories when you're resting. So you're basically replenishing glycogen. You're basically just charging your batteries up. So that way when you go into the next day, you're well fueled. And now you're ready to get after it. And if you happen to do a refeed on a training day, you just need to make sure you're getting those calories in early enough to where your body can actually assimilate it and have it ready to use for a training session. So it's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. I think, cheat meal, it's, if you're circling a day on your calendar is like, this is when I get to indulge, and it's kind of that probably indicates that there could be some gaps in other areas of your diet. Maybe the deficit's too aggressive, like you said. Or maybe you're just putting the event on a pedestal, and you don't need to do that. I think that's the other thing is people, that are on, especially in this demographic, and anybody who's got a decent amount of structure in their day-to-day diet, fitness, regardless of fitness goal. If you frame any meal out or day where you're unable to track is a cheat day, then that's a bad thing. Like, I think you should look at it more as maybe this is an opportunity for me to lean on some of the skill set that I've gotten from the structure that I've used to intuitively navigate this. And it's a good feeling when you go into those situations. Like, let's say you've been dieting, you're not in prep, and you have, you and your wife go out on a date, whatever, and you go in there and you enjoy yourself and you eat with moderation. Like, you shouldn't be undoing much, if any, work. It's like, if anything, you're just kind of hitting the pause button, eating like a normal person and not putting it on a pedestal. Like, okay, I'm off plan now in this short window. I can, I just need to get in as much as I possibly can. Like, you don't want to have that on-off mentality. So, I look at, I think sometimes, as much as we don't like the word cheat, I think some people view not tracking as like a cheat day, and I don't think that's good either. I think it's good to view those as practice, practice managing things and using hunger signals to kind of guide your intake rather than opening the floodgates.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're trying to get away with something. It's like just being inclusive. So, for example, like what I'll do sometimes if I know I'm going to have a day where I'm going to eat more, like go out with my wife or whatever, let's say it's a Saturday night, then Friday I might lower calories down just a little bit. Saturday, I'll just push calories towards the evening time. So I have plenty of calories there to work with, and I'm not focused on bodybuilding because I know I have 1,500 calories here. I can order a normal meal. I can have a dessert. I can have a glass of wine, and I don't have to talk about bodybuilding with her. I don't have to talk about a cheat meal or anything like that. It's just just part of the plan, and it fits in, and it's not like it's like, "Ooh, I'm getting away with this," So I think you get yourself in hot water if you have that mindset like, I'm gonna cheat, because usually when you cheat, I don't know about you guys, but when people cheat, it's almost like, what else can I get away with?
Mm-hmm.
And then that cheat day becomes more like 2 cheat days.
Yeah, cheat weekend. Then you get discouraged, and it's like, I'll just get back on track on Monday.
And then you're
that's
like, this could like go into like extremism, where it's like, oh crap, I cheated a little too much. Now, okay, I got to clean this up. Now I'm going to really cut calories down, or I'm going to do a bunch of cardio to fix it.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, they're starving again, and now they're having trouble adhering because now they can't help but cheat again because they're too hungry. So it just can spiral out of control for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird how much labels like that can matter. Like, I'm refeeding, I'm fueling myself versus I'm cheating because normal time is too hard, or like because my normal diet is over. Like it inherently has you labeling your diet as a restriction, your normal diet or your usual diet or your 100%. Low days.
You're restricted, like to cheat with our time too, like as far as food source, like because usually a cheat meal or cheat day means I'm going to go eat pizza, or I'm going to go to McDonald's and get burgers or whatever. Yeah. That means most of the time people are kind of refraining from those things. So it's not being inclusive with their normal day-to-day. So if I want to go to McDonald's, then I'm going to, okay, I can make that happen. I'm going to be smart about it, but I can include it as part of my process. It's going to, and I'm not going to restrict myself. So that way I don't get to a point where it's like, okay, it's cheat day today. Handcuffs are off. Now I'm at IHOP in the morning. I'm at McDonald's for lunch, and I'm at Domino's for dinner. And then I'm going to go to, what's that place? The ice cream shop. I forget the name of it.
Baskin Robbins. Cold
One
Stone.
of those. Yeah. I'm going to get a triple scoop ice cream.
Yeah.
Because I deserve it, because I did good for 6 days out of the week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes I'll look at those situations, though, if like some things are just impossible to estimate when you go out to a restaurant. If you normally go out and feel like you're restricted to maybe, similar foods that you normally eat that are more conducive to your plan, and then you want to venture outside of that, that's fine, but you should still be able to kind of control the quantity. It's like, I think there's value in not tracking and just giving yourself the mental freedom to just eat and relax. I think that's the biggest benefit of these. And, it's more of a mental break than like an event to create satiety. I think that's kind of how I would look at it.
In the last half of the question, would you say that, okay, well, let's just say we don't like cheat because of the way that word can show us so many things about ourselves and the way it can affect the diet, and like just the connotation of the word really affecting your ability to adhere to your plan. Okay, for all those reasons, we don't like that word. Got it. But then let's say we're using a refeed, and let's go into the rest of the question that would say, would it be better to do that on a training day post-workout or an off day to help fuel the next, like, I guess just refeed timing. If you are going to have a dinner, or not even dinner, a meal, a free meal, I don't know what I want to call it, refeed that's planned, high carb, or if it's just some bigger influx of calories.
Yeah.
How do y'all like to plan that timing wise in relation to training or workouts?
I don't think it matters that much, but if given the option, I agree with Jeff where, if you're recharging the battery on something, usually you don't, you're not, if you're recharging a power tool, you're not using the tool as it's on the charger. Like, it's kind of stupid analogy, but it's like you want to pull back and kind of create this increase, acutely in like energy availability and kind of soak up that food. I always like to time them the day before like a high volume session. So like if Monday's like an upper body, higher volume session where I'm hitting everything, I might do a refeed on Sundays. Because a lot of times you're kind of using yesterday's carbs anyway, when it comes to glycogen.
So usually when you're doing refeeds, it's either long cuts, preps, and they're going to come after X amount of low calorie days. So you're going to be more depleted. If you're running, let's say 5 or 6 low days in a row, you're going to be more depleted out. If you have a high step count, let's say, if you're training hard, you're going to use those refeeds to replenish things. So to me, it kind of just makes no sense if you're like, okay, I'm going to put this refeed here with high step count and hard training, because it's almost like, are you really getting something out of that? Like, are you really getting the recovery that you desperately need at that point?
Yeah.
Right.
So to me, it just makes sense. Like, refeed, non-training day, lower activity day, if that's possible. Rest up, watch Netflix, watch a movie, eat your carbs, get a good night's sleep. Like Brian said, you have a harder training session that follows. Like, your harder training session should be following the refeed days. And then maybe the easier ones are later in the week when you're running on those lower calorie days. So you do less work there. So supply and demand, it kind of just makes sense from that perspective. And again, if you're going to train on a refeed day, just make sure you're getting in those extra calories with plenty of time to digest. Otherwise, it's just like, it's not getting there in time.
Yeah.
It's probably more placebo in your brain, like, oh, I ate more,
Yeah. Which there's some value there too.
There could be, yeah.
But I think another way to think of this is, I'm sure you've gotten this question before, Jeff, during a deload, let's say I cut volume in half for somebody. Sometimes I'll get an email like, what should we do with calories this week? I'm not burning as much since volume's lower. Should I pull back calories to accommodate? And that's respecting energy balance, which is good, but it's also ignoring kind of the primary objective to reduce fatigue. And so, if you definitely, I don't think any of us are advocates, unless somebody's like really, noticeably behind in a fat loss phase. Like, usually I'm definitely not pulling people's calories back on a deload from the minute amount of less expenditure I get from doing, 2 less sets or something.
Yeah.
So, I think that
if
I
anything,
sort of try to, if
ahead.
anything, sometimes I'll bring it up.
I was going to say,
kind of
bring it up
to
like,
maintenance.
if time permitting, like, okay, you're on point with your scheduling as far as like your show or whatever the goal is at the end, you got enough time. It's like, that's even having a diet break in conjunction with the lower training volume or whatever that week. It's going to be, you're going to recover that much more.
Yeah.
And the following week, you're like, not only are you more energized, but you look more jacked because you're fuller now. Confidence levels boosted because you're like, I feel good and I look good. And then you have some great training sessions thereafter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's like you want to increase, and we've talked about energy availability before, but it's like we want to increase energy availability as much as we can without taking steps backwards, and I think that's usually going to be, taking steps backwards. Maybe it is taking a step backwards if you're behind schedule and you need to like kind of catch up. But in most cases, especially in the off-season fat loss phases, it's like, let's just, let it serve its role. And then we get back to the regularly, scheduled deficit the next day. So.
Y'all crushed it. Good answers. Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez hopping in to remind you about a completely free video course in the 3DMJ Vault called the Pro Bodybuilder Case Study. It's probably the closest, most detailed look at a full-blown contest prep cycle that you've ever seen or been able to follow in one centralized location. One of our 4 head coaches, Brad Loomis, will guide you through an entire 3-year stretch between competitive bodybuilding seasons with one of his longtime athletes and professional bodybuilders, Phil de Guzman. We are so grateful that Phil let us use him as a subject because he and Brad kept phenomenal records, both in their spreadsheets and visually with his progress photos, so that we could track his physique and body weight throughout the whole process. You'll get to follow his career from when he won his first PNBA Pro card in 2020, through his initial recovery phase, Through his first cut to make weight for a powerlifting meet, through his second and more robust off-season gaining phase, through his initial prep positioning diet and preseason holding pattern, and finally through his final contest prep fat loss phase where he won his second WNBF Pro card in 2023. It's really such a unique perspective on not only what a time investment it takes to see the results of natural bodybuilding efforts, but also to see how we coach on a macro scale. In this case study course, which again is totally free, you'll get a sense of why we tell our future competitors they can't simply contact us just a few months before they want to get on stage and expect the best results possible. You'll see how Phil and Brad made their long-term timeline and how the big picture considerations allowed for the improvements they were looking for over a few years' time. This is also one of the big reasons that we've recently changed our coaching options and offerings here at 3D Muscle Journey. We know the value of getting athletes ready early and how it impacts their results down the line. So we created some more entry-level onboarding methods to set more people up for success like Phil's in the future. So this kind of leaves me with two pitches here. First off, like I've already said a bunch, go take the Pro Bodybuilder Case Study course. It's for free at 3dmjvault.com, and you'll get all the videos and be able to download Brad's presentation with all of Phil's plans and photos and everything you need to kind of see how this whole coaching machine works over time. And secondly, if you've ever thought of working with us for any goals in the distant future, we think that you should reconsider that and possibly get on the squad now to see how you and your coach can make the most impact together for the long haul. Now, of course, we offer competition coaching with weekly check-ins during the season and occasionally more touch points leading up to specific show dates. But now we also have some great onboarding options for non-competitors as well. There are some lower frequency bi-weekly check-in options and even some training only or nutrition only coaching selections for those who just need help with specific parts of their athlete journey. You can always find links for coaching details on our main website at 3dmusclejourney.com. And additionally, we've got those coaching details directly linked throughout Brad and Phil's course as well, in case you get inspired to sign up while watching the videos in real time. So go ahead and head on over to 3dmjvault.com and check out the Pro Bodybuilder Case Study today. That's 3dmjvault.com to get instant access. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show. I've been following a program that's been working just fine for a couple years now. I think I'm a solid intermediate lifter at this point. When should I start having different blocks of training, like intro blocks, hypertrophy blocks, or strength blocks, etc.? Or do I even ever need to do that? So we all do talk about that a lot, especially with powerlifters. But yeah, let's hear about, I guess, because when people think of a program, they think of a split, they think of a week. But do you just do that week forever on end forever, which it sounds like this person is, which has worked so far? And does it ever need to, veer from that or become more complicated than that?
I'm assuming they're a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Let's do both.
Brian should do the powerlifter.
Let's do it as a bodybuilder first. Let's start with the bodybuilder, and then Brian can add a little just for the powerlifter at the end, a little icing.
So usually, the whole goal of any periodized approach would be to enhance a long-term outcome of some sort, right? So whether it's potentiating something, giving joints a break, like the literature on periodization for hypertrophy specifically is pretty underwhelming, across typical study durations, but that doesn't mean you can't change anything. If something, that's definitely not an excuse to never change your training. And I think for a lot of bodybuilders, just managing manipulating training to promote longevity, I think is an undervalued, excuse to periodize. So, maybe if your joints are a little beat up, or you've done a specialization block and, you've pushed it a little bit hard, scaling back, maybe you increase the rep ranges, decrease loading on the joints a little bit. Like those are all things that can lead to, support your end outcome, but aren't necessarily changing like the physiological response necessarily to a significant degree. And so I think in the case of who asked this question, if it's been working fine, like I wouldn't, like when something's working fine, the first question people often ask is, could it be working better? And someone who's been training a couple years early, still relatively early on in their training career, they're going to probably respond still pretty well to most stuff. And I think you should ride that wave as long as you can. So if something is working, like if you're noticing performance improvements, like not necessarily week to week, because that won't always happen, but block to block or every couple blocks, if you're seeing your baseline performance and different movements trend up, we know at least we're operating above like the adaptive threshold or, the minimum effective dose, whatever we want to call it. So if we're doing that, we know it's an effective stimulus because, we see the results. Now, do you enjoy it? If you don't enjoy it, then maybe you swap out some exercise selection, or maybe you change your split. And all of these are technically like, they're more manipulation of programming variables than they are like true periodization to like enhance an outcome. But I think it's kind of semantics. I think it can kind of just fall under the umbrella of periodizing, just manipulating these variables for this. But, and the other thing is like, are you staying healthy? Are you banged up? If you're enjoying it, if you're progressing, you're staying healthy, like you have more to potentially lose by adding more than gain by adding more, I would say, in that situation. Because you're gonna get to the same endpoint regardless if you're in this for the long haul or close to it. So I think it's easy for people, the kind of the timeline is they're a beginner, they don't know much, they consume information, train a while, they become an intermediate, they fall in love with this and they want to optimize it, and then that's when like the program hopping often starts. So if you can just stick that out and sort of understand, like, don't ignore the bottom line when you're looking at these things. I think sometimes people forget to assess, like, am I actually making progress right now that's expected for my training status? If you are, then nothing needs to change. It doesn't mean it can't, but it doesn't, like, hypertrophy blocks, strength blocks, there's probably, like, if you're training for hypertrophy, like, most of your work should be focused on hypertrophy. If you want to run like a lower volume strength block, maybe you resensitize to volume, or you just want to push strength up on, a handful of lifts, maybe gain some confidence with heavier loads that you can then kind of circle back to, more moderate rep ranges. That's fine. But I wouldn't say there's like super compelling evidence that you have to do that. But I think naturally it tends to work out where you are going to be manipulating some things, month to month to some extent. But you're not overhauling. Think of it as like refinement.
Okay. Jeff, for the bodybuilder, what do you think?
Perfect robot. If this person is a perfect robot with no emotions, nothing probably needs to change.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the human side, because I think eventually we're all going to have some type of injury. Hopefully nothing major happens, but all of us tend to have some type of aches and pains at some point. So we have to manipulate variables. We get bored. Sometimes you just need a change of pace. That sparks motivation again. Sometimes work happens where it's like, okay, I got to change up training frequency, or maybe go into a strength block. You're like, okay, I'm only going to do 2 or 3 compounds per workout, and that's all I have time for. So I'm going to do that because I'm hitting a bunch of muscles at the same time. That's all I have time for. So there's just all kinds of different human-sided things that we have to take into account. But speaking of someone who's been doing this for close to 4 decades now, I'm still training with intermediate programs. And I'm still like milking things out. I think it's just a matter of like, I've learned to simplify my process and not, like Brian said, don't change too much too quickly or all at once. And that's helped me to assess what's going on. Assess the aches and pains, and assessing, like we talked about, recovery, those types of things, and performance, like gauging like where my dose needs to be and how I recover from it. Because it comes down to supply and demand. That's the name of the game when it comes to this. With intermediates that I work with, I try not to change too much. Like if we go from block to block, it's not like, hey, I'm going to go from, we've been focused on hypertrophy. Now we're just going to completely go to strength. Like, okay, maybe this next block, let's see if we can get a little bit stronger. Let's just do a top set on some of the bigger lifts, top sets, back off sets. So you get a little bit of exposure to some strength work. It's not going to zap you out too much. You can recover from it. And you're kind of getting the best of worlds at the same time. So the shift from block to block is not like from one thing to the other all of a sudden. It's like it's just adding a little something here or there. And just, doing a top set, that gets people excited. I've had one athlete, I just added a top set. They got super excited about it.
Yeah.
One set, that's it. So it's things like that can go a long ways. But I don't think this particular person needs to necessarily like have all these different type of blocks. And the thing too is, going back to the human side, how can you predict 8 weeks from now, let alone 2 weeks from now, how your life is going to go? So my pet peeve with like trying to, let's say, have a block where you're increasing your set volume, like week 1, you're at 2 sets, week 3, 4, 5, like maybe 4 weeks from now, all of a sudden you're working a ton of overtime and I'm supposed to be doing 5 sets in exercise. Well, now I'm trying to cram in all this volume and I only have an hour and a half window to train in, but I have all this overtime. And then I got to go home and take care of the kids and all this stuff. So it's like the stress levels of the training really amplify. So even if you were to, we're just going to throw it out there. Let's say it's theory, you gain better with 5 sets. You're like, okay, I'm gaining 10% more. But if your experience is crap, like your quality of life is crap, then it's like, is it really worth it? Or would it be better just to keep your training block capped at 3 sets? In 3 months' time, you're going to be there anyways. But you've enjoyed the 3 months of training. Your wife loved you that much more, and your kids, they love that dad was home most of the time. So those things you kind of have to look at. So it's like you kind of have to take each person's context at hand. Like you might have someone you're working with who's doesn't have a ton of responsibilities and they have 3 hours a day to train. It's like, okay, well, maybe we can get into the weeds a little bit, be a little more nuanced, have all these advanced type principles in place and really go to town on it. But that's kind of rare in the real world.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like for someone who's focused on hypertrophy, there's not a research back huge pressing need to ever have these blocks, like separate blocks that have completely different emphasis. Doesn't sound like that.
I don't think from like
too smart.
From a hypertrophy standpoint, it probably doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot.
Right. The only thing that y'all did say that Brian said was if you are, which you don't have to be a competitor or want this, but if you do want a specialization cycle.
Yeah, I mean, that would fall under the umbrella of periodization.
Right. But that's the only one that sounds like less. Everything else, like y'all said, was like building confidence, building enjoyment, confidence through strength, enjoyment, changing schedules because of life for whatever reasons. But the only one that like actually relates to hypertrophy would have been like, in terms of if my goal is hypertrophy, would be to emphasize certain body parts that are weak or bring up certain things. But other than that, it's not like what would it be powerlifting, which you can get into, Brian. Like how would that be so much different for a powerlifter whose goal is maximum strength?
Yeah, I think for powerlifting, well, just to back up for a second, with hypertrophy, I don't think it's necessary from like a physiological perspective. Like this is gonna enhance, like I'm gonna get better outcomes in the long run because of this, because going from 6 to 10 down to 4 to 6 reps did something different on the cellular level. Like that's not, and I think that's honestly where a lot of people come from when it's periodization. Like how do I potentiate the effect and sequence things in a manner to do so? And hypertrophy, like anytime we do that, and this is a good segue into the strength thing, anytime we try to potentiate something, it's in an effort to like express a performance of some kind. So strength in and of itself isn't like, technically not a physiological adaptation. Like it's the expression of producing more force through increased muscle, better central nervous system, neural drive, coordination, things like that. So all those little adaptations are contributing to strength. And so that's why like it makes more sense, and probably why we see there's a bigger effect with periodization with strength, because we are kind of picking at different adaptations and biasing those in a manner that's trying to actually potentiate the downstream effect to a larger
You're
degree.
Like practicing in a different way.
Yeah. So for example,
which you don't
strength,
do with bodybuilding.
Yeah. So like take a power lifter. We have, there's 3 lifts that you have to do. And if we over specialize in those and, we just misinterpret the principle of specificity and all we do is squat, bench, and deadlift, like you will get stronger for sure, up to a point. And then you might experience some wear and tear, achiness. You might start to be constrained by just overall muscle mass. And you see this a lot like in younger lifters that, like younger powerlifters that over specialize a little early in their training career, where it's like if you just had 5 pounds more muscle on your body, like that would do more for your strength than hammering away at like these neurological adaptations, which like the heavier loading tends to, promote to a larger extent. So I think it's still very important for powerlifters to train outside of those high intensities, not only from like a development perspective, but also like even though development slows across a training career, let's say you've been training for, 20 years, it's like, okay, I'm pretty much, I don't see like robust changes in my muscularity year to year. What good is a quote unquote like development or hypertrophy block going to serve me? And that's a valid question, but then you have to consider the alternative. It's like the alternative is continuing to push high intensities, and then that can have
could save your connective
negative consequences. Yeah, exactly. So if anything,
I'm sure,
it's like
I'm not a power lifter, but mentally, just like
you just need a break.
Getting up for those big lifts, it's like hard mentally, and sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? Let me just lift this bodybuilder stuff for a while. That's a nice break.
And that's sort of what happened to my powerlifting career. It's like I took that break and I'm like, grass is a little greener on this side still, so I'm just gonna roll with this for a while. But you're right. I think the role of kind of periodizing for a powerlifter may change a little bit across a training career. And I think sometimes it becomes more like as you progress more of like a fatigue management like strategy than a potentiation strategy.
That's a good way to
So I think that's the main thing. But typically like a linear approach to periodization is like you're starting with, moderate amounts of volume, typically moderate rep ranges. You're focusing on hypertrophy primarily, or potentially work capacity if that's a limitation for the athlete. But you're trying to get the best stimulus for the least cost. Like that's sort of the theme with most hypertrophy training. Then, as you get closer to a meet and you want to start kind of ramping up that specificity, maybe you allocate a little bit more volume to those main lifts. Maybe you increase the intensity. Maybe you go from doing high bar squats once a week and low bar squats once a week, and maybe you're doing low bar squats twice a week. So it's kind of like that knob is just being dialed up a little bit, but and volume may come down to some extent for the sake of like the increased intensity of load. So typically we see volume in terms of like set volume kind of stay the same or trend down across a powerlifting prep. If we look at it as far and quantify it as tonnage or volume load, then typically we see it go down because you're doing less reps. So in almost always, I mean, there's exceptions to this, but typically like for linear periodization specifically, you'll see intensity of load go up progressively or trend up across the like macro cycle. So yeah, that's definitely has more utility for strength than it does hypertrophy.
Yeah. And then do I ever have to do that at the end? It's like...
You will have to do it, but maybe not for the reasons you think. Yeah.
That's a good point. I was going to say, like, well, no one has to do anything. And it definitely depends if you want to compete.
You probably
or you
will
just
find
love
your... Oh, for hyper... Yeah, I think
for
if you're...
For me, if you're not competing and you're just enjoying lifting and you're making progress over time, like, you don't have to do anything, right?
I think for a power lifter, eventually you will get to a point where you need to start being more strategic in how you sequence things if you want to optimize your progress. For a bodybuilder, I think you will end up having to manipulate things, but more for the human side, like Jeff said.
Like you were in school and now you're not, or you had a kid, or you like whatever, like anything. Okay.
And anecdotally, like I think there's something to be said for confidence with, like, if somebody's stalled out in like a 10 to 12 rep range and they've just been grinding away at this with the same dumbbells forever. It's like, okay, let's lower that at least enough so it'll bump you up to, from 70s
you're moving
to
a heavier
80s.
load. It's exciting again.
Yeah,
that's
it's exciting
top
again.
Sets work super well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so sometimes just adding one top set can kind of
5 pounds
confidence.
heavier and just hit. So if the top set, just really quick, you don't want to have like really high intensity, like close to failure. Like leave 2 or 3 in the tank. So it's not overly taxing. You're just exposing yourself to a heavier load. You'll acclimate to it that way, and you're not tapping yourself out.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gaining that familiarity with the heavier 100%. Load, and then once you switch back to the lighter one, it's
exciting.
A lot easier.
It's weird how fun it is. It's like
yeah.
Not even that crazy of a deal. But
I don't need to overhaul the entire training program for that.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so either doing that or sometimes running a block focused with like a little bit lower reps. Like either of those can work. There's just different levels of degree there.
Okay. Crushed it. Yeah, I think that was like above and beyond helpful for that question. Okay, so let's move on to question 4. Okay. I hear you guys talk about having a good relationship with food and not being too food focused, but what does that really mean? How do you measure that, or how do you assess it with your athletes? We do talk about that a lot. Jeff, you want to kick us off with that? What does food focus mean, or what does a good relationship with food mean?
Food focus in relation to, I guess, contest prep. Let's talk about that first. I mean, it's hard not to be food focused at a certain point because you get hungry. It's natural when you're hungry, you're going to think about food more. So that's normal. I accept it. I embrace the fact that there's going to be some food focus up to a certain extent. If it gets excessive, and now all of a sudden you can't do your normal daily life activities, that becomes an issue. So at that point, it's like, okay, is the rate of loss too aggressive, like the deficit itself? Do you need to adjust those things? Maybe just adjusting meal patterns, food sources, those types of things can kind of help out with that. Now, when I'm thinking about food focus off season, like someone who's not trying to lose weight, we're just trying to maintain weight or they're gaining, then that's a little bit of an issue. Because you shouldn't be food focused if you're at a decent weight. So that to me is kind of a red flag. It's like, okay, maybe this person actually needs to eat more. They need to gain more weight. Because sometimes people try to hold a certain body comp. Like it looks cool. They enjoy that aspect of it. But it requires a lot of effort to maintain that. And if that's the case where you're just like, okay, you had a meal, but then 30 minutes later, you're already thinking about the next meal. It's like, if you're living your life like that, like you have to ask yourself, is this really worth looking 10%, 12% body fat? Would it be better just to go up to like 11, 12, 13% or whatever? Just nudge it up a little bit and you remove the food focus. So instead of thinking about food 30 minutes later, you're like, okay, actually it's been 3 or 4 hours. I think I'm a little hungry now. I can eat now. Like it shouldn't be running your life in a sense. That mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think contest prep's always the easiest example of this. Anybody who's gone through a prep has likely experienced some degree of food focus. And I guess to define that, it's you're just thinking about food more than you normally would. Kind of if you catch yourself, like if your explore page on Instagram is just a bunch of like macro friendly recipes or things you plan to eat post show, like that's probably not a great place to be. But I think as far as, they asked how to measure that, I think that can be tricky because I just had this conversation earlier today with an athlete. They're probably 4 months post show now, back to a reasonable body weight, but still like that, still hungrier. And, I think he has a good idea of what his baseline hunger is kind of in the off season. And he recognizes that, okay, I'm still hungrier than usual. Like that may to me indicate like, okay, maybe you just need more time before we, change anything. Like maybe it's not a body fat issue, and sometimes it is. Maybe you've gained back enough. We just need to kind of like just sit in this environment for a while. And oftentimes it subsides there. But I also know it's easy for people when they get into the routine of prep to sort of forget what their off season like habits were. And so, it's like people, posting recipes for things like this is so good, this is so good, and it's clearly not good, to anybody else, but they, post show, like 6 months goes by, then they're like, shit, like that was not that good, that you kind of forget what flavorful food, or not even that, but like what being satiated feels like, and that can take time. So I think just taking notes in the off season, looking back to, okay, how is my hunger in the off season? When we were at this weight on the way down, how were you feeling? Like we often ask people like, how's your hunger compared to like your normal baseline? And so normal baseline during prep can be a high level of food focus. So you almost have to look at like your healthy baseline pre-prep, and that's where we're trying to get back to. And like Jeff said, if you're experiencing a high degree of food focus in the off season, then it's probably something that should be looked into.
Yeah, it's hard to learn enough about nutrition to be a good dieter without thinking about it, right? It's like when you're learning, it's almost like exciting to be food focused. I remember it was a lot of fun to like when you learn how to track and you see like, oh, my body is changing based on how I'm like, this is so cool. And then you're like, well, this is how I live now. Then it takes like years to be like, oh, that's not normal. Like you don't it doesn't, you don't feel like you're food focused. And you see in our comments a lot of the times, like when we share something that's from like the transitioning away from tracking course, we'll always get people in the comments. There'll be like two camps, right? There'll be people that are like, yeah, I remember that. And I know all of us sitting here have been through extreme periods of food focus during prep and having to unlearn that. But then there'll be a lot of people, just as many, saying like, well, tracking's easy. It's not hard. And I look how I want to look. And not that that's always bad, but again, everyone who's on the other side of that said that shit when they were in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Like I'm deep into prep. I'm very hyper fixated on a goal. So I can be 10 out of 10 hungry, but I feel like I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah. I can handle this because I am handling it. But you remove me, you put me in the off season, and now I'm like no longer hyper fixated. Like to me, I look back on that, I go, oh my gosh, like you were like way deep into that, and that's not normal.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, it's like you kind of there's different perspectives to look at it.
And I'll defend that with my life when I'm focused too. You know what I mean? Like this is, I'm handling it fine. This is easy.
Yeah.
All you do is open your tracking app. It's not hard.
Yeah. I'll use myself like an example. So like off of my 2014 prep, at the time I was 43. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in off season. I'm going to stay 10 pounds over stage weight because
Yeah.
I've been training over 30 years. I got plenty of muscle. I don't need to have this big gaining phase anymore. So I had it in my mind I was going to stay 10 pounds over because it's just going to make the next prep that much easier. And I was living there and it looked great, but it didn't feel great. Like I still had that edge of like, I'd eat half hour later, I'm like hungry, not like prep hungry where it was like, oh shit, I'm starving, but it was just a nuisance. And then I noticed performance really wasn't as good as it was in prior off seasons. So I didn't have the leveraging, I didn't have the energies like I usually have. So it's just, it looked cool. It felt good because my clothes fit. That was fun. But it was kind of a lot of work to maintain that. And there was a lot of focus. It just took a lot of energy to do that. And I finally just gave up on it. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like my quality of life just isn't there. So just allowing myself to eat a little more food, just a 2-pound difference made a huge difference at how I felt. So sometimes that's all it is. It's like, so you just have to like give up on this idea of a quote unquote certain look and just allow yourself to kind of like Berto says, like where you perform the best is probably not going to be the physique that looks the way you want it to look. But I mean, you're going to do better work. Like when you're in a well-fed state, you're not constantly thinking about food and all those types of things. Performance is going to be there. Recovery is going to be there. And you're going to make gains. And then, if you've run some cutting phases in the past, then you have that confidence of knowing like, okay, I gained a few more pounds than I'd like, but I'm confident I can take it off anytime I want.
Yeah, and that sets you up for having that off-season look that says like you don't like how it looks, but like that same weight will look better over time if you 100%. Let yourself eat.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Brian.
I think sometimes for like in 2014, Jeff, like you said something about when you're prepping, you're locked in, you're focused. Like everything, it's hard, but your perception is it's very manageable because you're so focused on something. So when you remove yourself from that and you put yourself in the off season, even if you're thinking like 10 pounds up, okay, I'm going to be eating more. Like you don't have that same drive, and you shouldn't. Like you're shouldn't.
You're fatigued. Yeah, you're mentally and physically kind of fatigued at that point.
So like if it's more mentally draining to maintain a look than it is to actually diet, then sometimes that look is leaner than you should be, I think.
Yeah. That's why I'm not a fan of the reverse diet, because it's like if you've spent months getting to 5%, 6% body fat, and then now you're expecting someone to stay that rigid and you're only eating another 100, 200 calories extra. Like, man, that's just like prolonged suffering. And even if you do ramp your calories up super high, let's say you get 1,000, 2,000 calories higher than you were at the end of prep, but you're only up a few pounds, like you're still extremely lean. You're probably experiencing the same things you felt during prep. Fatigue, hunger, and then you're like, well, look at me, I'm lean. I'm lean and I'm eating 4,000 calories. Like, great, but you still have the same feelings you had when you were prepping. And chances are your performance isn't probably all that great. And if it is, it's still, are you in a positive state to actually build more muscle at that point? Because you're still too lean. So those are things I kind of think about.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
And it sounds like when they're trying to get us to define or have measurements, it's like it's like a low level, like when you say food focus, it's like you said, you're like, I'll feel hungry, but like I've been doing this so long, like I don't have a problem feeling hungry. And you won't for a while, maybe for a really long while. I guess the more experienced you are, Jeff, but I'm trying to like explain what food focus like feels like. It doesn't mean that you're in the kitchen all day, but or that you're giving into it. It's just like a subconscious.
You're allocating more mental bandwidth than necessary, and you typically are. I mean, I would say, food focus is never going to help, but it's it's like some of it's expected. Like I think it's necessary to get into contest shape. Typically, it's necessary to push yourself to places where food focus will probably occur to some extent.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's a good thing, but it's like, it's kind of goes hand in hand with venturing to low body fat levels. So
yeah. It's like, I was trying to think, it's like having a crush, like when you're in like middle school, right? And like you're doing life, but like, it's like in the back of your head and it's really annoying. It's taking up.
You can't do your homework because you're staring at the person in class.
Like you're living life still, but like you're mentally like you're somewhere else often. That's what it's kind of.
Yeah.
That's what it's kind of
like.
like.
Good analogy for sure.
Okay, so
like,
there's that.
Like now,
then,
it's like off season. Like if you're like deep into the off season, you're not food focused. It's like you go about your day and you don't really think about your next meal. You're just doing life, and then a few hours later, you're like, I'm kind of hungry. Okay, I'm gonna go eat, and then you're done. Then you're off for another few hours. But when you're bodybuilding food focused, and it's like I said, you're like Brian was saying, you're just like mentally, it's on your mind all the time. Like you're thinking about, especially if you're like, I'm looking in your MyFitnessPal, like, what am I going to eat for my last meal? And you're spending like 20 minutes on MyFitnessPal trying to come up with the meal.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
It's like the macro Tetris that people play. And I think, Andrew, you said earlier when, early on, you feel like you get used to it. There's almost this appeal of having that structure. Like, oh, it feels more flexible if you've come from, It's like, oh, I can piece together, like, I can have some fun with my diet and still make progress. And so you start to realize, though, that over time, it's like the people that kind of eat more or less the same things each day, it's like they tend to be less food focused, which can sound ironic, like, oh, you're eating the same things, aren't you craving these other things? And to some extent that's true, but the other end of the spectrum is like throwing fuel on the fire. You're just constantly fantasizing about what can I make work here? And that's
it's like the cheating.
That's a stage. Yeah, that's a stage you kind of want to ideally grow out of.
Right. I'm trying so hard to put numbers on it, and I'm just trying to think of like Steve on our team's registered dietitian. He has I think a free course, sustainable fat loss, but also there's a video on our YouTube channel that he did about like the hunger and fullness scale, right? And then the hours and like the meals per day. So like most, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna like super generalize that most people do well eating 3 to 6 times a day. For most people, they're eating every 3 to 5 hours. And so, and like Steve says, our dietitian like say anything past that, people tend to get a little too ravenous and like overdo it. But like you want to be a little hungry before a meal and a little full after, and you want to eat about every 3 to 5 hours. And so if it's not in that window and you're already thinking about the food, like Jeff said, half an hour or an hour after your last meal, then that might be a sign, or like 2 hours even later is like a little bit of food focus. So like if you can't have like a clear period of work or fun with someone for more than 2.5, 3 hours without thinking about your next meal, like that might be a sign. Those are the only numbers I can come up with.
Yeah,
but
that's a good, I like that.
Okay. And then I guess that is, in terms of our population, that would be good relationship with food, right? Not focused on all the time. We got that, but also skills in the kitchen, which Jeff and Brad did, of course, macros into meals. But like, are you not just able to not think about it all the time, but also you can create more food focus if you don't know how to just use food quickly. So like learning what are good protein sources, good carb sources, whatever, because that can make you make your Tetris way harder if you don't just like learn these skills. So like, yes, learn these skills, but also like hunger, satiety scale from Steve would be helpful.
The last thing I want to say, and then we can move on, is like we're talking about contest prep, deficit,
right?
Embracing hunger because it's going to be part of the process. So people who are prepping for the first time, it's kind of a shock once that hunger hits them because they never experienced that before. Yeah. So it's almost like, I don't want to feel this way. So I'm going to try to strategize and do everything I can not to be hungry. And that can be not a good thing because what ends up happening is you end up spending 5 hours in the kitchen playing Tetris. Whereas you could just have a protein shake and an apple and you're not hungry anymore. And it literally took you 2 minutes to remove that feeling. But it's just embracing the fact that you're going to be hungry. You're not starving, because there's people in the real world that are actually starving. You know, it's not by choice. We're choosing to prep. We're choosing to put ourselves in a deficit, and you can remove yourself at any time. I think it's just important to know you have that power to actually eat more food if it gets that extreme.
Yeah.
But just accepting the fact that you're going to be hungry, that can go a long ways, and knowing that it's okay.
Right.
And then from there, you strategize smartly.
No, that's a good thing to end with, is that there's definitely dieting and prep versus not, and that food focus is inevitable in the first, and that food focus should be eliminated as quick as possible in the latter. I'm like, that's that. Okay, so we are running close to the end of our time, but we have so many freaking questions left. So if it's cool with y'all, we're going to quick fire them real quick. Like, I'm going to ask you, you got about 30 seconds. Can we do it? Do y'all think we can do it?
Yes.
Can we do it? Okay. 30-second cap or 1 minute cap?
30 seconds each.
30 seconds. All right, I'm going to start with you, Brian, because you said that. Okay. All right. I've done 3 long contest preps and decided to stop competing and just stick to fitness modeling. Sometimes they only give you like 3 or 4 weeks notice before a shoot day. And I'm wondering if you guys have any advice on how to look your best with that quick of a turnaround. 30 seconds, go.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to get used to probably being leaner than you should be. I think if that's the line of work that you're in, you probably are going to be hanging out in that environment that we just discussed, maybe higher degrees of food focus. So it's not an ideal environment, but if that's what is important for you to do, I would just stay, you don't need to hopefully get bodybuilding lean, but if it's like just fitness modeling lean, let's say 6 weeks out lean, 8 weeks out lean, I would stay 3 to 5 pounds above that.
Okay. Solid.
100%.
Next.
3 to 5 pounds.
Thanks.
Perfect. Yep. 3 to 4 weeks of dieting. That's perfect.
Great. Okay. Got it. Next question. Is it better to focus on unilateral or bilateral training for a better stimulus and more muscle growth? Go, Jeff.
Pick the exercise that you can do safely, effectively, where you have the most stability and you actually enjoy. So whether that's bilateral or unilateral is not going to matter, because if you basically cross that off, what the criteria I just said, you're going to get the most out of yourself.
Beautiful answer.
So I agree.
Oh, wait, is it 30 seconds each? I'm sorry. I
thought
cut
it was
you off
30
on the last one,
seconds
Jeff.
each.
I thought we were
I agree
alternating.
with everything.
Okay, give your 30. I'm going to shut up. Go ahead, Brian.
I agree with everything Jeff said. I will just add, like, if you have the time, I think there is, and you can create all things equal in terms of stability, enjoyment, output, you may actually get more output from some unilateral work, just because you can get some like higher degrees of recruitment with unilateral work. In the long run, how much that benefits us, I don't know, but that would be the
more
only
seconds, because now I'm going to debate them.
Okay, go.
Go.
Because
Go ahead.
Unilateral, you're only going to use so heavy of a load. You're only going to go so far with that. So even if you're getting 10% more, let's say, or 20%, I'm going to be able to load bilateral more and probably get just as much over the long haul.
Well, on a limb-to-limb basis, you could get more unilateral. So like if you did alternating dumbbell curls, just like supinated alternating dumbbell curls, and
I do those.
Hit failure, or let's say you did them both arms at the same time. Sorry. If you did both arms at the same time, hit failure, and then just with your right arm, you could usually knock out like 2 to 3 more after you hit failure with both arms. And that's just like your central nervous system allocating more drive.
Then you just rest, pause it, and just extend the set
you
out
could.
And get so we're balancing it out.
You could. I'm just saying, in
30
theory,
seconds is up.
This is not the quickest quick
you
fire.
can't debate me, then cut me off.
We're on a time limit.
All right, go. Next one.
Okay. Next question. I'm not a newbie anymore, and I generally think I've capped out my bone structure and genetics. I've accepted that it might take years to bring up my weak quads, but in the meantime, I'm still going to do my best to visually maximize them on stage. What are some posing tips to make my little quads pop more on show day? Jeff, starting with you.
Conditioning. Get yourself in shredded condition so you can see all heads of your quads. If you're in the front relax, you have no choice but to stand straight. So you try to maximize, but try to get your quads out past your waistline as much as you can without it making it look as aesthetic as possible. Some of those side shots, you can basically hide those quads a little bit. But we would need more of a visual podcast, to kind of answer that one.
Okay.
But getting conditioned, like that's going to be the name of the game. If you don't have the conditioning, your quads are going to look small regardless.
Okay, so get shredded as fuck. Got it. Brian.
I would just repeatedly quad stomp like Jay Cutler.
Okay. Oh, do the thigh slappy thing too
the thigh,
before you?
Yeah, consider slapping your thigh. No, I think everything, Jeff is taught me everything I know about posing. So I won't argue with him there. I will say, like, if you need more sweep, like you can't really directly target that in training. But yeah, sometimes I notice people will like square their toes up.
They're not
like
externally
angling
rotated
them out.
enough.
Yeah, or it's like, you want to externally rotate just a little bit and you can get the illusion of more whip.
Another thing real quick, usually I don't tell people to pump their quads up because it obscures definition if you get too much balloon in there. But if it's really bad, like you've got really small legs and you have enough conditioning, then maybe it is worth pumping your quads up because that might help to balance things out on stage.
Okay. Boom. Done. Great quick fire. No debates. Next question. I've been taking my lifting seriously for over 10 years and I've learned so much from you guys along the way. That's so nice. Thanks for all the YouTube content. That's also so nice. Thank you. All right. But I still pay the bills as a personal trainer and I feel myself getting more frustrated with my non-dedicated clients. It's like the more I learn, the less I can empathize with their issues. Does this happen to you guys as coaches or do you only work with strict competitors like yourselves? Brian, start us off.
No, we work with everybody. I think our approach, we meet the athlete where they're at in their journey. I think it's easy. Yeah, it sounds like, this individual, like their ideal demographic is more dedicated trainees and they like getting into the more nitty gritty details. And that's great. But you also have to realize, like, at one point, some of these dedicated athletes, maybe yourself, were in that situation. So I think I think there's times where there's frustration, with adherence and things like that. But you have to remember everybody's human and, meeting them where they're at and trying to build behaviors that kind of get them to that next level is that you can kind of treat that like the game is like, let's level them up and push them towards the ideal demographic if that's what you enjoy.
That's a good way of thinking of it. Good, Jeff.
So my sons have keto instructor. So I was observing him one day. He was teaching a class and one of the other parents was observing. He was watching his kid. So he goes over to the instructor and tries to tell the instructor, like, he should be working on these kicks and he should be doing it this way. And the instructor was super patient and he told the parent, he goes, he's a yellow belt. Right now, we're not focused on trying to be 100% skillful with that kick. What we're really focusing on is the community aspect, him working well with others, showing respect. So basically, he's saying, like, yellow belts, he instructs a certain way. I'm sure black belts, he instructs a totally different way because of the levels. So as a coach, I kind of learned from that. Like, hey, I got to go to, like Brian said, I got to go where my athlete's at. Are they a white belt? Are they a orange belt, red belt, black belt, wherever they're at? That's where I need to level up to. So I think it's important that who you're working with, you have to remember that and have that empathy towards that person. And I get it because I can get frustrated too. Like, oh man, this person didn't adhere. And then it's like, well, why didn't the person adhere? Like, what can I do better to make this person level up? Maybe to go from white belt to yellow belt.
I like that analogy.
Great answers. Okay, last question. I'm 3 months out from my first show. I'm prepping myself and don't know a lot of people in the scene. How do you get tanned for the stage? Do I hire someone privately or buy a self-tanner? Easy peasy. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd say, so what I learned with my last prep, I was super white. And Eric's like, nah, the tanning service at the shows, they'll get you dark. You don't have to worry about it. I'm like, you sure? I need a base coat. He's like, nah, you're good. And sure enough, every show I did, they're super professional. And most of them have been doing it for a long while and they're really good. So sometimes it seems a little expensive, but it's definitely worth it because you try to tan yourself and that is a job. To me, it's not worth it. So just rely on like whoever's tanning at the shows. Like that's who you probably want to go with.
Yeah, every show nowadays, because it wasn't like that even like 10, 15 years ago, like that everyone uses a tanner, but every show that you sign up for will have like in their athlete info packet, like this is the tanner for this show.
Yep.
Yeah. Brian, anything to add with tanning?
I was just going to co-sign not using a self-tanner because I've done that before and it was a
horrible
disaster.
Yeah.
And then you look different than everyone. Like you don't stick out in a good way.
Yeah. It's like the one guy that uses Dream Tan at an NPC show. You know, it's like, yeah, you look better in isolation, but not so much in the lineup.
So for the question, don't hire someone privately, use who's doing the show tan.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it yourself. So yeah.
That too. Or like hire, like go get tanned at a place and then come to the show. Like at the show,
don't go to like Aloha Tans and then go to the show. Just use the show tanner.
Yeah. Okay. You guys, we did it. That's episode 280. Thank you guys for spending the time, a little bit over time. And thank you, listeners, for listening to the 3DMJ podcast for 280 episodes. And we'll see you next time.